The UN Climate Summit was supposed to end on Friday, but now the summit has gone into overtime after nations failed to agree on a deal. The Loss and Damage Fund has been a hot topic at this year's climate summit, where the poor nations have asked the so-called richer nations to provide them with compensation for their historical emission of greenhouse gases. And the talk surrounding this monetary fund has been going back and forth. Proposals are being made by the countries to reach the middle ground as they try to bridge the division over funding relief for climate change disasters, as well as for the commitments for long-term action. But the talks seem to have reached a deadlock and look set to drag on through the weekend after negotiations stretched through the night and the European Union roundly rejected a draft document from Egypt. This comes after the European Union had made a surprise offer at the summit. The EU's proposal came on two of the thorniest issues, that is, tying compensation for climate disasters to tougher emissions cuts. The proposal would create a pool of money for the poor countries in exchange for a pledge to phase down oil, gas and coal. European Union climate chief later explained that the bloc is proposing a fund really focused on the most vulnerable and funded by all of those who can muster the funds. The issues of compensation and emission cuts are two sides of the same coin as far as the European Union is concerned, making clear that the 27-nation bloc won't offer more money unless there are concessions on emissions targets. And this comes as a shock for the poorer nations as they have to bear the brunt of climate change.
We have Saudi Arabia, Iran, Russia blocking language around fossil fuel phase out with the notion that we should be in this space talking about emissions and not energy, or we should be talking about climate and not energy, as if these two things are somehow separated from each other. That's like saying that we, in talking about the economy, can't talk about money.
Colleagues, good evening. I now declare open the 9th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President.
These are two sides of the same coin as far as the European Union is concerned.
Parties have made good progress.
We express our concern.
Show me what power looks like. This is what power looks like. How the people look like. This is how the people look like. This is what power looks like. Show me what the people look like. This is how the people look like. Show me what power looks like. This is what power looks like. How the people look like. This is how the people look like. This is what power.
I came to COP to attend and also to pressure our leader to make sure that they have been able to put loss and damage as one of the main topics in the agenda of this year.
All of the agenda items that have finance on it, or the global goal of adaptation, on all of the other things that actually are very much important to the African continent, are yet far from being concluded or reach an agreement that actually satisfies the actual need of the continent.
Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Erik Solheim, the former Minister of International Development, Norway, and the former UN Environment Executive Director and the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. Thank you for being with us on this broadcast. Now, there is a deadlock in the negotiations on the new proposal that would have set up a special fund for covering the loss and damage in the most vulnerable countries. What are the details here?
It will be very surprising if not an agreement is found in the last minute. That's what normally happens in climate talks. I remember in Durban, I think we were 3 days on overtime before a deal was made. And in some talks, even the negotiators acted like drunk because they had any whiskey, but because they had been deprived of sleep for so long. So I think a deal will be made. However, the deal will probably have very few details. A fund will take time to establish. This is a completely just demand from small island development states, from African nations, from the poor nations of the world. They have not contributed to the climate crisis, but they are feeling the brunt of the crisis, flooding, sea level rise or droughts. So they demand very justly that Europe and North America should pay for the pain caused to them.
Absolutely. Now, what were the differences in this new proposal from the original EU proposal?
As far as I understand, it's a clear commitment to a future fund for loss of damages in these poorest of nations in Africa and small island development states, and that every nation who can afford should pay. But let's not focus on this, because at the end of the day, even if a fund is set up, this will be very small money and it will have limited real impact on the world. I think the big story from Sharm el-Sheikh is a very different one, and that's all the agreements which are made for green investments in developing countries. This is happening in Egypt. Egypt has made great deals, massive deals for green hydrogen in Egypt. Indian company Renew and many others are committed to invest in Egypt. But also small African nations like Namibia, like Mauritania, they have made massive deals for big private investment in green hydrogen in Africa. And that's really following the lead from China and India, the two biggest developing nations. They are not focusing so much on the talks, but on how to create the domestic conditions for green growth. And that's also what will have to happen in Africa.
Yeah, very important. And is there any way to move these negotiations forward, considering what Antonio Guterres had urged for with maximum ambition on the proposal?
Absolutely. I mean, I think no negotiator and really no leader in any significant state in the world, and no one is in doubt on what's at stake. I mean, climate will be a massive crisis, is a massive crisis for humanity, and we're in it together and need to act together. But the main solution will never be found in diplomacy. The main solution is in the political economy. All technological developments, all the business opportunities which are there. Climate is not just a problem, it's a crisis. It's also a fantastic opportunity for green development, green transport, electric vehicles, solar energy, wind energy, green hydrogen, all these opportunities for the development world to have a much faster growth, but a different growth from what we previously saw in North America and Europe.
Right, and Eric, finally, when can we expect a deal?
I would assume today or tomorrow. There is a kind of normal rhythm of climate talks, and hardly any talk ended on the date which was set. I mean, it's normally always 1 day into overtime, sometimes 2 days into overtime, and in extreme cases, 3 days into overtime. This has happened in basically every climate talks in the past, and I'm sure this will be the pattern in Egypt also. And even if there were not to be a finalized text, again, that may not be a major crisis for the world, because the diplomacy is a small contribution to the answer, but the main answer now is with business and with governments. The European Union, China, the United States, India, all the major economies of the world are now moving in concert towards a greener world. They need to speed up for sure, but the direction is set.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you being on this broadcast and your valued insights there.
Thank you.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.